Hi, guys. I'm Lizzie.
And I'm Sierra.
Welcome to another episode of A Girl's Guide, Our Road to Recovery.
So today we're going to be talking about parents who we have lost and parents who, aren't around or aren't in the picture anymore or currently. So starting off, Lizzie, I know you've lost your parents. So
Mhm.
will you tell me a little bit about that and how that's affected your life and, your recovery also?
Yeah, so my dad passed away the week before my sixth birthday from cancer. And my mom had passed away when I was 15. She had a stroke. So when I lost my dad, I think at that age, like I understood, but I didn't understand at the same time. And him and I were like very close. Like my best friends were like, I was very close with them. So when I lost my dad, um, I felt like a part of me like just wasn't as happy. I kind of felt like my childhood was affected by that in a lot of ways. Because that was very traumatic for me. Um, and I feel like in a lot of ways, like I needed my dad and he wasn't there, you know. It's like the parent you don't have, and as a child, like that's who you want more than anything when you don't have that. And that's kind of what my experience was with it. And I was very angry after he passed away. Like I didn't understand. And I remember my mom got me into church, hoping that would help my anger and my frustration and my confusion as well. And I remember we would go to church, and I think it was when they were talking about Easter, and like how Jesus like comes back to life and all of this. And I remember I asked the pastor, I said, "Well, can my dad come back like
Aw.
Jesus did?" And I can't remember exact the answer he had gave me, but pretty much was that can't happen, So it was like really confusing to me why he couldn't be here, why he had to go, like, why did he have cancer? Like, why did this happen to our family? And those were kind of questions like I've always had in my head and never really have gotten an answer. And when my mom had passed away, like I was there for everything. I was there how to call the ambulance, rode in the ambulance, like her being like was responding and then couldn't see because she had a stroke and then just wasn't responding and was slurring her words. And that was really scary to see. And it was very, very traumatic. Being 15 and this is happening to your mom and being really scared. But I also felt like I was in denial of like what was happening during that process. And I think that's kind of like a coping mechanism I do with very serious situations, like trying to guard myself so I don't lose it. A lot of times when I'm around people, like it's hard for me to lose it. I have a hard time like crying in front of people because I feel like I have to be strong for everyone else. And I remember my mom, like when the doctor came and talked to me and my aunt, because my mom told me to call her and have us like meet us at the hospital. And the doctor sat down with us, and they were going to have to do a procedure where they basically had to put a tube in the back of her head that would drain the fluid, but also the blood. Because when she had the stroke, blood started like I guess like filling up, and that's why she couldn't see was because of the blood. From what I understood, that's what had happened. It was a bleeding stroke. And they had did that and she was on life support. And I think like after 72 hours you basically have to make a decision. Do you want to keep them on life support where they're a vegetable, or you take them off and see if they'll wake up? And I think like my family had already made the decision, but they wanted me to be in control of that because they knew how close we were. And me being so young, I think also they wanted me to be a part of the decision, but I think they also didn't want me to resent them if they made that decision without talking to me about it. And I believe it was my sister who sat me down. I think my aunt was there for the conversation as well. And they explained it to me. They sat down, they talked to me. We do this is what could happen, this is what could not happen for both scenarios. So we had decided to take her off, and she didn't pass away like right away. Like everyone pretty much was saying their goodbyes. And one day my aunt had came to me and said, have you said goodbye? Like, have you done that? Have you made like peace with it? Like, no. I was like, I don't know if I'm like ready for this. And she pretty much had said, like, I think it's time. And I went in there and I pretty much, told her, it's okay if you go. Like, my aunt and uncle who were going to take me in, they'll take care of me. Like, everything will be okay. So I think my mom's like number one concern was always about how is Lizzie going to be? Is she going to be okay? So after I told her that, like, not even half an hour passed. And even like before she had passed, there were like times I had went in there. This was after, I believe, after they took her off life support. And there were times I would just go in there like crying, like 'cause I had such a hard time with it. And she was someone like one of the few people I could be vulnerable. And she always let me feel my emotions no matter what that looked like. And I felt like I could trust her. And I remember one night, I like held her hand, I was crying, and I was like, if you can hear me, like give me a sign, like I just, and she had squeezed my hand. So it was like before she passed, like I knew she could hear what I was saying. I knew she was there. And even though, since she has passed, because that was back in 2014, I know she's still a part of my life. And it looks different than her being like physically present. And I think after she had passed, like, I did pretty well with masking in front of everybody. I lived in denial for a while, even after she had passed away. I had a lot of anger, and that more so went towards my aunt and uncle that took me in. Not that they did anything wrong. They try to comfort me. They try to be there to their best ability, and a lot of my anger got taken out on them. A lot of my anger got taken out on my sister. Um, and, during that time, I was really depressed, went through, had like a lot of anxiety, really suicidal. And, because when you lose your last living parent, it's really hard, especially being a teenager. And I think being at any age, it's such a difficult thing to grasp. And I think after my mom died, I went through therapy. And over the years, I've learned, because I think in a way, I used to resent my sister for how she was grieving, but I don't anymore because I've learned that everyone grieves differently. What my grief might look like is different from someone else.
How was
You
she grieving differently?
I would say, like, she was more angry, and I didn't understand why. 'Cause, like, it's our mom, like, why are you angry? And I think now that I'm older, like, I understand it because I was more of sad and, just wanted everything to be okay, and she was grieving different than what I was, and as a child, I think, when we lost her mom, she was in her 30s, she just had a kid, like, about 6 months prior. So for her, it looked a lot different than what it did for me at that time. And, like I said, as I've gotten older, I've learned that everyone grieves differently. And there's so many different emotions that go with losing a loved one, especially your parent. And, I think it's important when those emotions do come up is that you feel them, you let them happen. You don't try to bury them and push them down because they're going to come up eventually if you don't try to then, so I think it's important to just deal with them when they come.
And all of those emotions are valid.
Yes.
Like, you're allowed to feel those feelings.
I think it's good to have a good support system. And I think even in the earlier stages of grief, especially after my mom had died, sometimes I would even write letters to her or talk to her like I would be talking to her.
Yeah.
Have conversations like if I was going through something really rough, like act like she was there for me to talk to her. And that kind of, I feel like, in a way, relieved me a little bit, feeling like, okay, maybe she's listening. And I think even like if you lose a parent or both parents, it is part of your like healing process is to try to keep your parents' memory alive. And that can look different for everyone, also depending on the relationship you had with them. Rather, if it was a good one, this might be easier to do. If you didn't have the best one, it might be harder to do that. And if you didn't have the best relationship with them, to find some type of peace for yourself because you'll drive yourself insane. What it might look like continuing their legacy. Maybe it's planting their favorite flower, continuing a hobby they did, or even their career or work they did. Maybe they had a business and you want to continue that on for generations. Again. May look like donating to their favorite cause, watching or reading their favorite movie or book, or even continuing traditions you had with them, things like that. And I think it's normal when you lose a parent where you can end up having some sort of resentment. I think for me, it looked like losing them so young, and I didn't understand because there's certain milestones like I've gone through my life, and it's been really hard that they haven't been there for me. When I graduated high school, like I cried because my parents were, when I got pregnant and I had my first child, like that was hard for me to not have my parents there for those things you really want them there for. You don't really think about it until you don't have that type of thing.
I cannot imagine at all going through that, especially at such a young age. And that's something that you have to deal with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
The pain might get a little less, but that pain is always there, especially for things like when you really need your parents for like
Mm.
those huge things like you getting engaged and having your baby. And, those are things that we need our parents for. And yes, you have your aunt and your uncle, but they'll never truly fill that hole,
Mm.
you know. And I'm so, so grateful that you have them though,
Mhm.
because some people don't. Like once their
Yeah.
parents are gone, like they could end up in foster care or
Yeah.
with a relative who they barely even know, or somebody who just is taking them in just because they have to take them in,
Yeah.
not because they truly want to,
Mhm.
you know, just because they had to. So I cannot imagine not having my parents, you know?
Yeah.
I understand to a point, but like my parents are still alive. My mom's not around, but she's still alive. So I haven't had to experience that type of grief.
Yeah. Yeah, changing, gears a little bit because I know you mentioned your mom. I know you haven't she's kind of, like, been in your life, things we have talked about. Um, what would you say, like, would you like to share, like, some of your experience with that and what it's looked like for you even since you've been clean?
Yeah. So I know so many people who both of their parents or one of their parents are addicts or in active addiction, and both of my parents are addicts. My dad has 24 years clean, but my mom has been in and out of active addiction my whole life, till this day. She's in jail currently because of her active addiction, because of the things she did while she was using. And she's, having to face the consequences, which is what life is. We always have those consequences. So my grandmother raised me because my parents weren't around. My dad got clean when I was young, but he wasn't ready to be a parent yet.
Mhm.
He had to fix himself before he could, help me. But I saw that as him abandoning me, especially when I needed him the most growing up. And my mom I would see her, like, she would when she was clean, she would come back to my grandmom's house, which is where she lived, and she would sleep it off for a day or 2, wake up the next day, and I was living at my grandma's house still also because I was young, which 'cause she raised me, and my mom would show up, get clean, sleep it off, and then wake up the next day and try and be like super mom, like she was never gone those weeks prior out using on the street, didn't know if she was dead or alive. And I dealt with that for years and years and years. And that's how it still is with her. But I don't live at home anymore. Obviously, I have my own place. So it's her calling whenever she's back home at my grandmother's house, or she's in the hospital, or she's in jail. And she tries to think that, oh, because she's not currently still on the street using, that she has 2 or 3 hours clean, that things should snap right back to normal. And that's just not how things work. And every time it's, oh, I'm going to stay clean this time, things will be different. I'm so sorry. The same thing over and over again that, I can recite backwards because I've heard it so many
Mhm.
times. It's the same, promises every time that mean nothing. And I tell her that, and she still says these things. You know, you have to prove it to me, show me. And then maybe after some time, I'll start to believe it. But unfortunately, it's never gotten to that point. She's never been clean long enough to actually change. It's always been the same exact thing in and out of my life constantly. So, in a way, it's like I'm constantly grieving the loss of my mom, even though she's alive, which is sad. Everybody needs their mom and their dad, and I have my stepmom and my dad in my life. Um, and yes, I have my stepmom, but she'll never be my mom. She'll never fill those shoes as much as I'd like her to.
Mhm.
But that's just the way it is. There's things I go through all the time that, like Lizzie was saying, like milestones and stuff that I don't have my mom for. Or just when I'm having a bad day and, I want to be able to call her, I can't. And, that's sad. And I know so many of us experience that. And she's in jail currently. And the past couple years with her, I've tried to set boundaries. And I took so long to finally like stick to these boundaries, and I've had to actually stop talking to her because as soon as we would talk, my anxiety would go through the roof. As soon as I would hear her voice or even talk about her, I'd get anxiety because of, I don't know why exactly, but just her herself puts me in a bad mood.
Mhm.
We argue every time we talk because I always tell her how I feel and speak the truth, and she doesn't want to hear it. She's constantly thinking she's the victim of everything, or why won't you do this? Why won't you do that? Like she'll go to rehab and expect me and my boyfriend to bring her clothes or buy her clothes or do this for her, do that for her. And I've done those things over and over and over again. And I just no longer will do that. And she doesn't understand why. She says, well, I always did this for you. When? No, you didn't.
Mhm.
You know, what here and there, you maybe gave me some drugs when we were out there on the street using together. Like that's what you gave me. Sorry, no, that's not a mom. She's just never truly been a mom to me. And it's something I've always needed and wanted and craved and prayed that I would finally have one day. I remember about 6 months, 6 to 8 months ago. She was in treatment. She was getting out of jail and she was going into treatment. And me and my sister picked her up from jail. She got released and she was sentenced to go to rehab and she was on probation. And, I went to her court date and I even got up and spoke to the judge and, begged for her to give her another chance because something in me truly believed that she was done. It just felt different than all the other times with her. So I literally got up and spoke in the middle of the courtroom and asked the judge to give her another chance. And he did. And she got out and we picked her up from jail and we went to Walmart. And for a change, it was my mom actually buying me and my sister things. Like she bought us both a couple pieces of clothing and stuff instead of me and my sister Shauna, or me and my boyfriend buying her things that she needs for rehab. It was her buying us stuff. And that was the first time in years and years and years that she actually felt like my mom and we were doing something together as mother and daughter. And I haven't experienced something like that in I can't tell you how long. Then we take her to rehab and things are going good for like a week or two. And then next thing you know, she's gone. And it's right back to the same old thing. And she's out on the run because she has warrants because she was sentenced to rehab. And she blames me for leaving rehab because I didn't give her $200. I only gave her $100 of her money, even though I said I'd bring her more money once she ran out, because she was ordering food and stuff at the rehab. And her excuse for leaving was because of me. Nobody, obviously, that's just an excuse. I can't make you leave rehab. I can't make you do anything. She just had that money in her hand and she left because money is a huge trigger. I know it was to me, especially in the beginning, and it 1000% is to her too. She just wasn't ready to admit that, which is just showing you right there she wasn't truly ready. And when she left after only being there for 2 weeks, it broke my heart because for some reason I let my guard down and I got my hopes up and I let her come back into my life. And then she left and all of that hope and that happiness of finally having my mom back was gone yet again, which I've dealt with my whole life. So it's horrible when your mom is alive, but she's not in your life. It's that constant grief and loss, even though she's not even, hasn't even passed away. And it's sad because when she's out on the street using, I've literally come to terms and accepted the fact that I'm going to get that call one day that she's dead. Like, no kid or anybody, should have to think that way or accept the fact that your mom's going to die and there's nothing you can do about it. I can't tell you how many times, I've given her lists and lists of rehabs or even called rehabs for her or reached out to people I know to get her into rehab. And she just doesn't go, or she goes and leaves right away. And every time she goes, it's somebody else's fault. Oh, I don't like it here. It's all young people. I'm the only old one here, which is not true because I work at a rehab. We have half the time more older women than younger women. And even if you are, so what? No place you're going to go to is perfect. None of them. But if you're truly ready to be clean and stay clean, you can get clean anywhere. And that goes for anybody. You can go to the fanciest rehab in the world and you'll still find something wrong with that place. But if you're really ready, none of that other stuff matters. And every time she would go somewhere, it was excuse after excuse of, why she couldn't go to that place or why she left that place or they were mean to me or this, and this. It's always me, me, me. It's she would never take accountability for her actions ever. It was always everybody else. Or when me and my grandma and my sister wouldn't do something for her, it's always, well, you should, or never, I understand why you don't want to, you know? It's like the narcissist,
Mm-hmm.
1000%. Everybody else's fault, never hers. And that's addict mentality. When we're using, we don't take accountability for our actions at all. And it's everybody else's fault. But in reality, we're the problem. Nothing else. Just like when I was using, I didn't care if I was hurting others, even though I really was. But like if somebody wouldn't do something for me, even though I was the problem, I thought they were the problem. Like, why don't they want to do this for me? Why don't they want to do that for me? Why don't they like me? Why can't I go to their place? Because Sierra, you're an addict, you're using, they don't trust you, and they don't owe you anything, and they've probably already done a million things for you, and you mess it up every single time. So why would we continue to do something for you? You know? It's just that constant victim mentality. And that's what we as addicts do when we're in active addiction. We think everybody else is the problem or we're not hurting anybody else. Like if only my mom truly knew, the trauma that she has made for me and my sister and our family. Like no kid should have to worry about getting the call about her mom being dead or her mom getting beat up and killed out on the street, which I've gotten that call before about her ending up in the hospital because of somebody beating her up or, whatever. And that's just sad. It should not be that way. And it's like, I got clean at 21 and I made a whole life for myself. And that's another thing. She'll get clean and she'll be like, well, I have no life. Or, I'm stuck at grandma's house, her mom's, my grandma. And, I never go anywhere. I never do anything. I never have anything. I didn't have any of that in the beginning either. None of us do. We have to work for those things. They don't just happen overnight. I didn't have anything when I first got clean. I didn't have a penny to my name. I had my clothes and that's it. Nothing. But then eventually, I stayed clean and things started falling into place, which I tell people over and over and over again. I've told her a million times. As long as you continue to do the right thing, things will fall into place and everything will work out. Stay clean, things will work out. You just have to push through and stay clean. It's that simple.
Yep.
And everything will work out. I just really hope one day that will happen for her. But I honestly think, she's been doing this her whole life. She's not going to stop. She's about to get out of jail. And somehow, even though she was facing years, they gave her time served and she's about to get out already. She gets lucky every time. She never truly has to face the consequences. And I think that's what she needs. She should have to sit in jail for at least a year. Maybe that would actually help her. But instead, she's about to get out and go home, right back to my grandma's house, and probably do the same thing all over again. But when she gets out, I'm going to stick to those boundaries, and she has to have at least 6 months clean if she wants to try and work on our relationship and us try and rebuild our relationship.
Yeah. I think it's really good you have those boundaries set to, protect your, because how, it affects you. So let me ask you this. Since you've gotten clean, like emotionally and mentally, has there been any things you've noticed within yourself that are a direct result because of the way your mom has been in now your life and that relationship you've had with her since you were pretty much a kid? Like, is there any behaviors or, just emotionally, mentally, how that's affected you over the years?
I think, um, definitely, yeah. Anxiety is one of them,
Mhm.
abandonment, um, trust. All of those
Mhm.
things come into play when your mom's constantly in and out of your life, or she's choosing the drugs over you, which when I was younger, I didn't understand that. But I do now, obviously,
Yeah.
because, I've been there. I've done the same things. I chose drugs over everybody else and every other thing. And, you know, I, um, I have a lot of, I deal with anxiety a lot. And I'm sure some of that stems from her and the things I went through when I was younger and still go through, but I don't allow her to put me through those things anymore as much as she did when I was younger,
Mhm.
because I have to stick to those boundaries. And, she's taken so much peace away from me. Every time I talk to her, it's, anxiety through the roof, or I'm arguing with her. And, it affects not only me, but everybody around me. And, I know my boyfriend knows the second I talk to her, or you tell right away when I have talked to
Mhm.
her. It just puts like a damper on things, and she takes my peace away. And I just can't allow her to do that anymore.
Yeah. Um, so what would you say, like, what is healing looks like for you with the relationship with your parent?
So, like with my dad, I think it was more about, so like when I was younger and my dad wasn't in my life, and then he was, I went and lived with him for a while. And him and I always had a good relationship, but my stepmom and me did not. So that put a strain on our relationship, honestly, because I thought, my stepmom was like some evil, wicked stepmother when I was
Mhm.
younger. And because she was the one who was always like telling me the rules and making sure I did things and stuff, my dad was kind of like in the background. My stepmom did more of the parenting
Mhm.
because she was teaching him. He was new at it. He didn't know what he was doing. So I understand that, you know, but at the time I didn't understand any of that. But now I do. I'm older and I look back and I realize, she wasn't doing any of that to hurt me. So now that I'm older, I think I have, you know, putting gotten rid of those resentments I used to feel towards him and towards her.
Yeah.
So, but that took a while. And some of
Mhm.
those are still there, and some of them might not get resolved ever, or I might not get my answers. But we have a really good relationship today, my dad and my stepmom and I. So I think just revisiting those things from the past probably wouldn't be a good idea. And I probably won't get the answers I want to get,
Mhm.
which I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But today, like, I can call him anytime. I can go there anytime and call my stepmom anytime. Like we went on vacation together, and that was amazing. And, that's because I'm clean. And my dad and me and my stepmom, we've all put in the work to fix our relationship. And it didn't happen overnight. It took a while to rebuild it, but we're in like an amazing place today. We have a
Yeah.
healthy relationship today.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone that has a rocky relationship with their parents, or what kind of advice would you give to someone whose parents are in another life or just not present at all?
I think advice I'd give them is the main thing is setting your boundaries and sticking to them, because at the end of the day, you have to protect yourself. I know it's hard because you don't want to hurt their feelings. That's why I would continually give in to my mom every time I'd say, I'm not going to talk to you.
Mhm.
You have to get some clean time first. And then I'd give in because I just wanted to talk to her, or I felt bad because I wasn't talking to her.
Yeah.
So, I know it sucks. And for me, I had to put everybody else's feelings aside and worry about my own feelings, because my peace and sanity and well-being comes first, and my sobriety more than anything. I don't know if I would go and see my mom and she would be drunk or using, and I might end up using too. Who knows?
Mhm.
Luckily, I've never been in that situation, and I would hope that she wouldn't put me in that situation. But you have to protect yourself first. So if you're in the same type of situation as I am and have been, set those boundaries. Tell them, until you get clean, I love you, but I cannot be in your life right now. I have to protect myself. I come first. When you get some clean time, or once you get some help, or even if they're not an addict, say they're just doing things you don't like and they're not good for yourself. Tell them, until you change and I see some real progress, I love you and I'll love you from a distance. Just keep them at arm's length. You have to worry about yourself first. And those conversations are hard. It took me a long time to actually do it. But once I did it and stuck to it, things have been much better. I don't have to I worry about my mom, obviously, but I don't have to worry about, protecting myself from her anymore, because I just don't talk to her. And it's easier that way right now. So figure out if it's easier to continue the relationship and try and help them, or if you've done all you can over and over again, and take a break, however long that break needs to be. Do you have advice for people who have lost their parents?
I would say
Or if say they're clean and they lose their parents while they're clean.
I would say one of the things, like, I noticed, like, after my mom died and the funeral was over, like, people will check up on you after, they die and maybe after a few. But it's like once all of that settles, the funeral's, like, done and everything settles, is when is when I needed some. Even if it's just one person, like, try not to keep everything bottled up, express those emotions, even if that looks like, talking to someone about it or even writing those feelings down if you don't want to tell anybody. Because I've noticed me keeping those things bottled up just does me more harm in the long run. And, you know, your feelings are valid, like Sierra had said earlier, how you feel like, that is important, whatever those emotions look like, but also trying to find some type of peace throughout the process. And a lot of times I try to hold on to the good memories I had with them, pictures, things that, you know, make me think of the good times versus, thinking of them negatively and how they're not here and what they're not a part of,
A good idea.
and just trying to find some type of positive within it, which can be hard when you don't physically have them a part of your life anymore. Like I said, no matter how old you are, you could be 50 when you lose them. It doesn't mean it's going to hurt less than someone who's a teenager who loses their
Exactly.
parents. So it doesn't matter how old you are because it doesn't mean it's going to hurt any less.
And we're all gonna lose people at some point in our life.
Mhm.
It's how we choose to, deal with it and
Yeah.
grieve.
Yeah, and it looks different for everybody,
Exactly.
but also trying to find healthy outlets to do that, especially if you are in recovery. You know, you don't want it to get to the point where you end up relapsing over it.
Yes.
That's the last thing you want to do. So,
And that's the last thing your parents would want
yeah,
or whoever died would
yeah,
want.
for sure. And just finding healthy outlets, whatever that might look like for you. Maybe it means carrying on their legacy in some way. Like for me, it's looked like my aunt and I planted one of my mom's rose bushes she had in her yard. When my daughter gets older, like I want to do traditions with her that my mom and I did.
Or like you named your daughter after your mom.
Yeah.
Continuing
So
on that.
yeah, it's very my daughter's name is very sentimental towards me, and just finding what is gonna be the right fit for you for your healing process. And no matter what anybody tells you, you're probably not going to get over it in 6 months, probably not a year. And it may take a few years, may take a decade. You may never get over it, but each day you learn it gets a little bit easier with the pain. Because it's not going to be easy. The pain is never going to go away, but you learn each day how to live with it better.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, Lizzie, for, telling us your story, about your parents and sharing your experience and, giving advice to others who have gone through the same thing
Mhm.
or are going through the same thing currently or are going to one day. Because we're all going to lose our parents one day. And that's going to be super, super hard,
Yeah,
you
most
know?
definitely. And thank you for sharing your experience with your mom. I know it's not the easiest thing, but I'm sure someone that's listening can totally relate and maybe needed to hear that because that's probably what they have experienced, maybe, or are experiencing currently.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening.
And we will see you next week.